What we're talking about, what we started talking about now is worldview. We're talking about our view of the world as it pertains to events that are going on in the world. Right.
Right.
And you just brought up the most recent Donald Trump interview at CNN and how polarizing that was, because and the other thing is, and I don't speak for any side of this discussion. This opinion is Mark Aylward's opinion. It's not anybody else's, right? And I'm
Right.
not
Which, well, like I said, we're recording this, but this is a good place to start, like you said. But yeah, and I think we speak for ourselves, but
right.
you'll right. Okay.
Right. And we have common beliefs and we have things we disagree on.
Yeah.
And the overarching point is that's okay. But I think that, and I would, you can disagree with this if you want, of course, but I would consider us both leaning right. And you've suggested that you're more moderate than I, and I would agree with that. I'm farther right than you are, but I've never had a problem talking to someone in a civil fashion about things with which we disagree. But I can't always say that about the person that disagrees with me. And I just think that's sad. I think that's unfortunate. I think we're missing opportunities of humanity. I think we're missing opportunities of cooperation. I think we're not allowing ourselves to learn from people that have different opinions, because as soon as you shut down to one side of any argument, any discussion, that discussion is over, right?
Yeah.
And no one wins. Nobody accomplishes anything doing that,
Yeah. Well, we'll try it out on this. Like I said, I'm bringing up the wheel, so I'm staring at the screen when we start. If you want, we can. This will be fun, because I'll share my. We could use it about a topic. We're going to have obviously our own opinions, and we'll just see how it goes. We'll try this for 30 minutes. But the starting point is today we're going to talk about, of course, our self-alignment and how that, plays into our life and our everyday thoughts and so on and so on. And then, hey, Mark, what are we talking about today? We're going to talk about worldviews. Well, what's going on? What's on your mind, Mark? Like, you could say, well, we're divided or something. And then we can talk about the Trump interview if you want, and just see what happens.
Yeah, like I said,
but the main thing is we're laughing the whole time. We're not getting serious. And I think we're gonna have a fun, maybe even heated conversation on this one.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Yeah,
I think and like you said before we started recording that you listened to the whole thing without any video, which is it's a very interesting experience, right?
It really
because
was.
the video definitely, if you take away hand gestures and facial expressions and eye movement and body language, that's a different experience, right? That might be a more pure experience, quite honestly. Because you're only being influenced by the words and the tone of voice. You're not being influenced by what the audience looks like. They're not wherever the camera goes, it doesn't matter to you consuming it via audio, which I think is interesting.
I think you'll hear what I have to say. I think you'll find to be interesting too, because
Go for it.
Yeah. Let me get this window. Some reason it's not cooperating with me today. Here we go. Okay. All right. What do you see on the screen?
I got the wheel, and I think that, if I may, I think just to remind the audience, for anyone who's watching on YouTube, I'll try and make the commentary representative of what the image is, but we've got this Imperfect Men's Club podcast and this notion that we're all imperfect, that you and I, Jim, we readily admit that we're imperfect. And when we talk, every time we talk, we just expose our imperfection, among other things, right? Which is most of the time pretty funny. But the concept of this framework is it's a circle. If you can visualize a circle and then concentric circles moving outward from the inner circle, and the inner circle, the core, is the self. All right. And what we mean by the self could include things like self-talk, self-alignment, self-awareness, self-worth, self-confidence. And I think we've both agreed, Jim, way back to when we first started talking years ago, that most of us aren't as self-aware as we could be, right? And I think that if we were all more self-aware, I think the world might be a little bit of a better place, because when you become self-aware, you're less likely to want to blame other people or other things. You're more interested in maybe having control over your emotions, having control over your future, having control over what you do during the course of the day. That's the concept of the framework. And the 5 categories that are the next concentric circle outside of the self are basically how you deal with other people, which we call relationships, your worldview, which is kind of painted by your political view and how you were raised and where you were raised, your profession, what level of profession are you? And do you work for someone else? Or are you an entrepreneur or solopreneur or freelancer, whatever you want to call it? And then the next one is money. And, it's a classic concept that people have either a scarcity mindset or an abundant mindset with regard to money. And then the next one, and I think this is the last one, is health. And health is very simply split one of 2 ways, physical and mental. And you and I have talked a lot, Jim, about the fact that, there's physical and mental health, but they're so closely connected, it's difficult to talk about one without talking about the impact of the other. Am I putting words in your mouth, or is that kind of where we are?
That's exactly where we're at. And again, this is our season 2, and that's why we came up with the word Imperfect Men's Club, because we realize, especially as we get later on in our life, we are imperfect. We make mistakes, and the best way to deal with that is, one, have a sense of humor, and first of all, just recognize that. So, when you were talking about being self-aware, if the one of the categories of the 5 is our relationship with others, and particularly women. That could be, again, your mother, your girlfriend, wife, whatever it is. And I would say 9 out of 10 women would say one thing about men is they're not self-aware, or they're not they think we only think of ourselves, right? That's their biggest criticism about men, typically from women, is that we're just not self-aware of what's going on. So I got a kick out of you mentioning that in the beginning. But I think that, again, the other reason that we did this framework is because it is alignment. And at the end of the day, everything points to us. And whether we're aware of this or not, these 5 subject areas are always playing a role in our lives. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So what is the subject matter today? And again, there's every episode we do, it's kind of on the fly, and it's what's going on in the world, but also what's going on in our heads that we know people will benefit from by hearing let's just say a different perspective, or a humorous perspective on things. But
I think, what I before we started recording, I said, let's talk about politics in an apolitical fashion. And you asked me
impossible to do.
Well, you asked me what I don't think it is. I don't think it is. I think we disagree on that. I think that when I talk politics, obviously, depending on who I'm talking to, if I'm talking to my father or my brother or some of my conservative friends, that's one conversation. But if I'm talking to people who are more liberal, I just try and have a little bit more of sensitivity with regard to, humility, sensitivity, kindness, civility. I think that's just being self-aware. Who am I talking? If I'm talking to my grandson, I talk to him differently than I talk to my grandfather, or my grandmother, or my girlfriend, or my daughter versus my son. To not acknowledge that those conversations are slightly different, I think, is ridiculous. I mean, then you're not being sensitive.
So let's get into it. So on worldview, again, we have our subcategory is politics or your childhood, because that weighs in on our worldview, how we were raised, in terms of your religion, your heritage, nationality, so on and so on. And then the politics, we broke it down really into 2 areas: conservative and liberal, which in this day and age means Republican and Democrat, right?
You know what? I would say, not to cut you off, I would say it means nothing. I don't think those words mean anything anymore.
What does not mean anything?
Liberal and conservative.
And liberal.
Yeah, I think
because the lines are so blurred. You mean?
I think we've been segmented now, and I think where most of the world thinks that we are is far left and far right, and we've lost sight of this middle ground.
I would happen to agree with you. We've become extremist on both sides, and this seems to be, I don't know if it's the American way or what it's turned out to be. But if you notice, we have Coke and Pepsi, right? We have Budweiser and Coors, which right now that's not probably too. But everything that we do, we have Republican, Democrat. We have there's these rival, almost tribal groups that we just become more and more divided, in my opinion. That's very sad. So,
well, I think
yeah.
though, Jim, I think that from my perspective and just my humble individual perspective,
Mhm.
I think that what I see happening is the world is striving more towards the middle because it's so
Mhm.
crazy on the far left and it's so crazy on the far right. They don't make any sense, you know,
Yeah,
and
I
there's,
think this, and your point of Mark is that it's driving people to the middle,
I
and
believe
now
it
they're,
is.
but they don't seem to have a voice, and I think that's what.
Well, that's another thing. You know, if you look, and I know we don't use a lot of names, but the most recent media blow up has been Tucker Carlson getting kicked off of Fox or leaving Fox, or
Yeah.
we don't know. And then,
Mhm.
but at the same time, Don Lemon, who's way left, got kicked off of CNN. So that to me says the world wants some middle ground because those two guys are probably pretty extreme in most
Yeah.
people's minds.
Yeah.
You know, I would be more aligned with Tucker Carlson's views than I would be with Don Lemon's for sure. But I
Mhm.
think it's safe to say they're both. Tucker Carlson is not in the middle. He's a little
Mhm.
bit to the right, if not far to the right. And
Mhm.
Don Lemon, in my opinion, is certainly way far to the left. So
Mhm.
if both those guys are getting canned, that's why I think that we're crying out for more of a middle road.
Yeah. Well, then this let's talk about this town hall interview with Donald Trump and CNN this past Wednesday evening. So like I was telling you, I was driving for an event in San Francisco. So it's about no traffic, 30 minutes, but there was some traffic, so it was a good hour. And it just by coincidence, I happened to fall on that live interview from CNN. And what's interesting about this, I recognized the voice of the narrator or the whatever the gal's name is, but I couldn't put a face to her. And of course, Donald Trump was being interviewed. And I have to tell you, after it was over, I have a completely different opinion of of a lot of things, and we'll break that down. But not having the visual of seeing their face or prejudgments about them, Donald Trump's face, and this what's her name, by the way? Do you remember
I have no idea. I only watched a short snippet and I saw video and audio. You were just audio.
Yeah. So I'll full disclosure, my first impression, and then after it was over, and then I want you to come in on the topics because I listened to the entire thing, didn't see it. I was extremely impressed with her. As much as I despise her as a person on it, as a talking head on it, I thought her questions were actually very good, and she clearly had an agenda and a position. And she wasn't letting him off, but I thought she stayed with the questions. I thought she asked hard questions. It was a town hall. I know that CNN was criticized for even doing this, but some of the questions she asked were straightforward, deliberate, and his answers was classic Donald Trump.
Yep.
And it, I have to tell you, I've completely changed my position on some of those. Well, let's just say I've changed my position on Donald Trump before. I'm a registered independent, right? But I've voted for Donald Trump twice. I will not vote for him this time. I won't. And that's sad because I think he actually was a pretty good president compared to Joe Biden, which I think is probably the worst president we've ever had, and a man that is not even aware of where he's at. So, just full disclosure as far as what I believe in those positions.
So that's interesting. So let me ask you something,
Yeah.
and I'll play devil's advocate. And
Absolutely,
I don't know yet because you and I haven't talked about this until right now.
Right.
And I didn't see the whole thing. I saw a couple of Donald Trump lines, like,
I didn't see it either. I listened to it.
How are you gonna? Yeah. How are you gonna get rid of it or get inflation to go down? And he goes, drill, baby, drill.
Yep.
And I don't like Donald Trump, his personality. I wouldn't want to spend any time with Donald Trump, but I think we lose sight of the fact that you're not voting for a friend when you vote for the president. You're not voting for someone whose personality that you enjoy. You're not voting for that. In my opinion, you're voting for what is this person most likely to be putting into place from a policy standpoint. And across the board, I believe his policies are better than the Democratic policies. The rest of it is bullshit to me. The rest of it means nothing to me.
Okay,
No.
I agree with you. However, I was saddened as an American that these are our two choices, right?
Oh, I
This is-
definitely agree with that. I definitely agree with that.
and if you again don't look at him, listen to him, how he responds to questions, he acts like a 10-year-old. He really does. And it's also what makes him so good, because he breaks it down to a 10-year-old level. But it's embarrassing. He's embarrassing, and Joe Biden, in my opinion, is even more embarrassing.
And I think the rest of the world is looking at us going, "Are you kidding? Are you fucking kidding me? This is the best you guys can do."
Yeah.
But it's systemic.
100%.
Let me go back to what you said about the CNN anchor and the fact that she didn't back down. That's what journalists are supposed to do, right? They're supposed to.
When I say she didn't back down, she didn't let him get away with just saying things that aren't factual. And of course, it's CNN, so their facts are, slightly skewed to their political opinion or political ideology. I realize that, but some of them, she had facts based on data that what he was saying, he would exaggerate things and he would get away with it. And she wasn't arguing. I don't think she was confronting him. I don't think it was she was trying to create an argument. She was just saying, no, that's not true. And here's
and I don't think you can say that's not true. I think you can say, no, I beg to differ, Mr. President. I don't agree with you.
That's
I don't
kind of what she said.
Well, she said it's not true.
Sometimes in some cases with her facts, right? Whether it's documented, it wasn't true.
Well, this is another area that fascinates me, because truth, right? Drawing conclusions without investigation or assessment, right? It's like,
okay, let's get into the weeds on this though, Mark, because he's right. Let's not be general. Let's be specific. She asked many questions. The one that was a hot topic was what happened the day before, and that he was by a jury and a judge awarded. She was awarded $5 million. Did you hear what his response was?
No.
Yes, I'm saying you have to listen to it. Don't watch it. The response was, "That lady's a whack job. I've never met her in my life. I swear on my kid's grave." He said, "I rarely do this, but I don't know who she is. I've never met her in my life. She's a whack job." That was his answer. Now, of course, at that point, the whole crowd was laughing because they were clearly Trump supporters. So the interviewer, the gal, she didn't have the crowd on her side by any means. She had the opposite. And I was impressed that she stayed with the questions. And the fact that he maybe she is a whack job, but how do you win a $5 million lawsuit against you with somebody you've never met? He denied ever knowing her. Well, and then he said, and it may be true, it was stacked against him. He said that the judge was corrupt, and he says all the things Donald Trump says. Maybe there's some truth to that, but at the moment there was a judge, there was a jury, and there was an outcome, and he refuses to even acknowledge that, as he didn't even know the person. Do you believe he didn't know that woman, Mark?
I don't know what to believe, Jim. I don't know what to believe. But I think that this is the way that I look at these things, right? Because I think we've had enough experience with the media lying to us, the media sharing only. We don't know what to believe.
I agree.
I don't know what to believe. I'm not defending Donald Trump at all. I think he's on some level, he can be repulsive. Okay.
Yes.
But again, I don't give a shit, right? If he hurt this woman, if he did anything to harm this woman or did anything inappropriate, then he deserves to be punished and he deserves to be held accountable. I feel that way about all these people, including Hunter Biden and Joe Biden and the whole Biden family, right?
Right.
But all of these people, the thing that Donald Trump has, pick a name: Pelosi, Schumer, Biden, Romney, McCain, pick a political name on either side. I don't care who it is. They are attached to a machine that feeds them power and money. Donald Trump has his own power and money machine. He doesn't cater to that. I love that about him. Is he flawed? He is entirely flawed. Okay. But He wants to break that system down. It's referred to as the swamp. It's referred to as, corrupt DC, whatever. But these people have been in office, all of them on both sides, for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. They all live in mansions. They all have health insurance plans that are different than you and I. They don't pay for them.
Yep.
They fly on private jets. They have no idea what the common man deals with, and they don't give a shit, right? Their entire purpose is to garner votes. And then after that, it's to garner control and power. That's what this whole thing is. And it's not a partisan thing, right? But I think
the system is broken in that, first of all, they don't make that much money, Mark. I mean, the only way they make money is, let's just use our favorite person, Nancy Pelosi, where they're so corrupt, they benefited from the laws that they create, and they make money that way. But once they get into office, they need donations in order to stay in office, and they're taking those donations based on voting a certain way or having certain policies and views. So I think that's one of the problems is, if you were that smart, you wouldn't be in politics. We're not getting the best and brightest people.
We're not.
We have
because when
we're getting narcissists, and we're getting it's the quality of the people is really, really poor, which is sad. I think we're on the same page in terms of these are our two choices. So again, ask anybody about Joe Biden, and they won't say they like Joe Biden. They hate Donald Trump. We don't vote for anybody. We vote against somebody else. And that's what our politics has become. And it's, I think what embarrassing. It's sad.
It is. I think what you have to ask yourself, because I think we all in our democratic republic, to be specific, not our democracy, we have three choices, right? And maybe four, excuse me. You have the Republican candidate, you have some third party candidate, you have the Democratic candidate, and you have the ability not to vote for anybody. I don't believe not voting for anybody is wise. And we could argue that all day long. Like, what's one vote going to do? Well, there's countless examples in life of, what's one trip to the gym going to do? Nothing. But what if you keep going, So the political system here is broken. I was at a forum, and I think I told you about this, a group meeting that I go to once a month, kind of around this idea of civil discourse. And there's usually a host. And in this particular one, the host was an attorney, and she was just coming in to talk about, we were talking about AI and the legal consequences and repercussions that are ahead of us with regard to AI. But we got off on a couple of different tangents. And I said to her, and without context, do you believe our legal system is still the best legal system in the world? And she paused and she said, yes. However, the problem with our legal system is not our legal system. It's the people in our legal system. And I thought, that's a really interesting
What is she talking about? Like the attorneys, the business model? What is?
Well, then she went on to
broad,
talk about,
but I don't benefit from such a broad.
Well, let me drill down a little bit. She said, just one example is, we're letting people into law school now that should not be able to get into law school. We're lowering the standards for whatever, diversity, inclusion, all kinds of different things. We're trying to be fair to people when in fact we should hold people to a certain standard, because then the system doesn't work unless the people in the system live up to a certain standard of behavior and performance. And I said, well, I totally agree with that. That's true.
That applies to everything, not just our legal system.
Everything. That applies to airline pilots. That applies to doctors. That applies to everything.
Right.
That's why diversity, equity, and inclusion is bullshit, right?
Oh boy. Oh yeah.
I
mean that.
But anyway, she said to me, and I didn't do that. I wasn't trying to put her in a corner, but she said, if I go into a trial as the prosecuting attorney, and the defense attorney is one of those DEI candidates, and I can wipe the floor with him, how fair is that to the defendant? It's not. The system breaks down. Those two lawyers have to be at least somewhat equivalent in experience and talent and ability, or the system breaks down. That's an assumption of the system, that we're holding all the people in the system to the same set of standards. And this, I think, is now something that goes into every facet of our country right now. We're not holding people to the same standards. Now you can come into the country no matter who you are. That's how sustainable is that?
Yeah.
and over and so on and so on and so on.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, it leads into the whole conversation of this, everything being fair and equal. That's an impossible thing. And I guess some people's belief is, well, we have to strive to be more equality, more equal. So does that mean that in every room of 100, then you have to have 14% of them being of African American, Black, and then the other, that's not realistic. And then
Dude, what
to
happens
impose,
what happens to the NBA if you exact that standard?
yeah, that's what I'm saying. It doesn't hold, it doesn't work. But there's somebody that's obviously become in power that is forcing this down our throats. That's why I'm so interested in this Bud Light story. It has nothing to do with the commercial that they ran or the video. It was the interview that the VP of marketing, so-called genius from an Ivy League school, bashed her own customers. This, business 101, marketing 101.
Yeah, we have our customers are all like frat boys, and we need to do something about that.
Right.
I'm like, why?
So they're their number one beer brand in America, and she goes after what, 1% of the market, not even that, 0.5% of the market. And now
she's no longer gainfully employed. That's a good sign.
Well, no, they actually won't even fire her. They won't come out and say that she's on a leave of absence because they're afraid of that. Yeah, I for some reason really enjoying this story, because it just goes to show you that eventually, you have to take care of your customers, and they alienated their core customers. And I don't think Bud Light will ever be the same. Never.
No, I don't think so either. And I mean, look, just to take that right into the, transgender men swimming with women, and or wrestling with women or weightlifting with women. I mean, who thinks that's sustainable?
Yeah.
Who thinks that makes sense? And we're constantly being told, if you're not compassionate to this tiny percentage of the population, so such that you change the rules for them, then you're being mean or bigoted or racist. What you're really being is rational, right? And we gotta cut this shit out. And I do go back to this notion that there's all kinds of signs that I see that we're moving back towards a middle place, a middle ground,
I would agree. I think that Bud Light is the first, this is a major event for a corporation or the customers of a brand pushing back and saying, you know what, we don't mind, but don't disrespect us. And if you don't want our business, then we won't give it to you. And this is the response.
Yeah, I think Jim, the big word, and I've said this to you a million times, the condescension at the highest level. They really think we're stupid. And I think back to something you said earlier, that we're not attracting the best and brightest into politics. The reason they think we're stupid is because they're stupid, and they think everybody's stupid.
Yeah.
Mark, I need to hold your hand and wipe your ass because you can't do it for yourself. I mean, how condescending is that?
Well, there's no question, at least in my opinion, that the media, especially the talking heads or even advertisers and politicians, deliberately divide us to create these groups. So we listen to them. And I like to think we're moving into a new era of media where that's not the case. And the Tucker Carlson, or even I like to use Joe Rogan, right? He gets 40 million listeners an episode. That's far greater than any mainstream media. So the media is changing before our eyes. The so-called mainstream media no longer has the weight that it used to. And I think that in the long run, we'll be better off with this. Yeah.
Oh, I totally agree. I think that, again, in a free country, and you can get nuanced about democracy, republic, partially socialist, whatever. It doesn't, in a free country where you can say whatever you want, with the exception of things like, fire in a cinema, and do whatever you want, as long as you're not hurting someone else. Now, people like to get in there and start to try and define what hurt means. I'm not talking about hurting feelings. I'm talking about true hurt, right? The playing field levels over time. It's kind of like our team sports, right? It's like, when I grew up, the Patriots sucked, right? And then one thing happened. Robert Kraft bought the team. Like, I don't know how long ago now, And then he was the leader. And as soon as the right leader was in place, then he went and got this guy called Belichick.
Mhm.
And he didn't tell Belichick what to do. He said, you tell me what you need, because I'll give you what you need. And then Belichick went and got this guy named Brady, you know, and if you walked into the locker room of the Patriots, which I never have, so I'm speculating based on lots of experience, because I'm a
This
Patriots
guy
fan.
named Brady that wasn't even a first round pick. He was like
He was 199th.
right.
Like
So,
6th or 7th round.
yeah.
Like the last guy.
Yeah. With the chip on
He
his
was-
shoulder
when,
to
you- when
prove
you're playing
something.
when you're playing dodgeball in middle school, he's the last guy, the skinny runt over in the corner. They're like,
That's
all
a
right,
great-
come
that's a
on, you
great
can come on
visual.
our team.
Yeah.
And so, but you went to the locker room with the Patriots, and everybody was responsible. Their work ethic, when they showed up, the time they showed up, what they did, how they read their playbook, how they studied and watched film. They did what Tom Brady said. So Belichick could strategize, Kraft could fund and support, and Brady was the tactician and the motivator.
Yep.
And that's the way systems work in a free society.
Yeah.
And if you deny that, then that system's going to break down. Like, look at Jerry Jones, you know, he can't get out of the way. He can't leave his team alone. And he always has a lot of talent. He goes through coaches like, you know, I go through toilet paper.
Yeah.
And he's never, everyone's like, oh, I can't believe how about, you know, how come they can't win? It's because of him. He just has to get out of the way, you know?
Yeah. The other thing I like about what describing the story, especially the different personalities and characters, but Tom Brady had a chip on his shoulder and something to prove. And that's I think another, it's how you win, because it's that extra edge that he took, you know, some things that didn't go his way and he turned that around and made it work. But sometimes look at all the bad first round draft picks that they passed on, that those guys don't do well.
Mhm.
And it's because they either never been challenged or everything's come so easy to them that when they get into that adversity, that they don't have that edge. And I think that's you know,
Well,
plays out even.
they also never understand that the team is more than just them.
Yeah.
They're all about themselves. And I think if you take that and you say, look at our wheel, you know, you're not self-aware if you're on a team.
Yeah.
And you're thinking that you're the one responsible for the success of the team and you're going to do whatever you want to do. That's a complete lack of self-awareness.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why we like talking team sports so much.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So
what else? What else did this, back to this Trump interview? Because I thought it was quite revealing of our upcoming choices. Because at the moment, it looks like we're going to have the exact same two choices that we did in the last election, which is, I hope that's not going to be the case.
I think I don't know what's going on with Ron DeSantis, and I don't know how that fits in with Donald Trump. I don't have enough understanding of the.
Well, nobody does, because he hasn't even declared that he's running.
Yeah, but I don't really understand how that works. I think, you know, there's this whole idea that you have to be electable. It doesn't mean that you can't just be good or honorable or intelligent or capable. You have to be electable. And I understand the concept of that, but I'm not smart enough to understand what that means in terms of, I think DeSantis is a non-issue. So I think it does leave Trump. I could be completely wrong.
Non-issue, on the other side, he's not gonna run.
I don't think it matters whether he runs or not. I think Trump has too much energy, too much exposure, too much. The people that hate him are just about around the same number of people that love him, you know? And I think that, so that's a whatever. I think the Biden thing is a shit show because, you know, if they actually prosecute based on what I believe they have, those guys are going to jail. How likely do I think that is?
You're talking about him and his son
and his whole family. Yeah. But we've had historical example after example of people doing corrupt things and not getting in trouble. So I think it's naive to believe that he's actually going to get punished for what he's done. Then you have his age and whether he's even going to be alive in 2 years. And I'm not being facetious, you know? And then you got guys like Gavin Newsom, who is a complete buffoon because you live in his state. So I don't have to tell you that. But he's a charismatic person that has a lot of people that seem to like him for God knows what reason. The interesting variable on the Democratic side is Robert Kennedy. I think that's really interesting, you know? But is he too far behind to catch up? I don't know. And some of the things that he believes in are antithetical to what the Democratic Party believes in, like, the vaccine and poverty. And he seems like a pretty logical guy to me,
Yeah.
and he seems like a pretty even keel guy to me.
Mhm.
So that'll be interesting to see. But going back to what you said earlier, you're not going to vote for Trump. What if it's between Trump and Biden? You're going to vote for Biden, or you're just not going to vote?
I agree with you. You have to vote. I don't think you should have a voice if you don't vote. There's always going to be a third party or a write-in or something else, but I just don't think he's good for our country. I'm talking about Trump at the moment. He'll just divide us even more. And I don't think Biden is either. It's a sad state of affair. It's a great time for somebody to come into the political scene that we don't really know. That was kind of like Obama, and even, of course, Reagan to some degree, right? The country was in a bad place. He came in, focused on becoming American, and just changed politics as we know it. And I think Obama did as well, come out of nowhere, and then slowly became the president of the United States. So
I think Obama, I think it was good on some level because it opened up a lot of dialogue, but I also think he had the opportunity to completely bring the country together, and he completely fucked that up.
I would agree. I think I happen to like him. I think he did some good, but like you said, he's divided us somehow again, and that wasn't.
What's interesting about him, and I'm not an Obama fan. I don't know him. I've never met him. This is not on a personal level. I think he's a fraud, and I think if you go back and you look at and dissect his speeches, he's an extremely eloquent man.
Yes.
That says absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. And I think if people were honest and said,
and Biden's an extremely, how would you describe Biden? If that was Obama's description, how would you just, because Biden's not eloquent at all. And
he's a moron. That's what
really
Joe Biden is.
Yeah.
And he's not only a moron, he's a fundamentally bad person. And
I would agree with that.
He's completely inauthentic. And I'm flabbergasted that the guy got into office. I think that there was a massively talented group of campaign managers that put this guy, like, they took advantage of COVID so well and the messaging so well. They put the guy in the basement.
Yeah.
I mean, think about that. Robert Kennedy right now has challenged Joe Biden to a debate, and they're not going to do it. And there's only one reason they're not going to do it. Robert Kennedy will decimate him.
Yeah.
He will make him look like a child, and everyone knows it. And so I don't know why the country's not in an uproar that the two Democratic candidates aren't willing to debate. This is the thing I'll give Donald Trump credit for and the CNN anchor credit for. That's how politics should work. The diametrically opposed guy should go on the station that completely disagrees with him and ask some really hard questions that he is then forced to answer so we can see what he's made of. And if the result of that is you won't vote for the guy, that's great. That's great. But it's way better than going, hey, what kind of ice cream do you like?
Yeah.
It's
bad. So, all right. Well, let's wrap this one up in politics. I don't think there's ever seems to be, you can't win somebody over in a political conversation. You're at this stage. Yeah. Maybe you can get them to rethink one thing, but you're not going to change anybody's mind, in my opinion, especially.
Yeah, I don't disagree, Jim. I think that what I try to do is not to change anybody's mind, not to beat anybody or convince anybody of anything. I really, really, really would just invite everybody to say, have you thought through your positions on things, or have you just accepted a mainstream argument or a populist argument? And I think it's really sad that most of the country on either side has accepted the most popular argument. I just posted something about this. It's like, are you a lemming? Don't be a lemming. Lemmings fall off cliffs and die. Stop and think about what you're being told and seek out context, seek out comparative analysis, seek out opposing opinions. That's all I want people to do. I don't care what they conclude.
Yeah.
I just want them to dig in.
I agree. So
we should do more of this, dude.
All right. Let's wrap this one up.
All right, dude. That was fun.
All right.
All right.
Have a good weekend.
All right, you too, Jim. Peace.